"I'll give you the suite if you can pay for the worst room." The manager laughed, but the woman shut everyone up. The afternoon sun reflected off the mirrored glass of the Gilded Marina Hotel like blades of light slicing through Park Avenue. Helen Peterson got out of the Uber carefully, holding her faded cloth suitcase with both hands. The floral scarf tied around her hair protected her grey strands from the brisk New York City wind, and her flat sandals touched the pavement with the softness of someone used to walking on dirt. At 52, Helen's face bore the marks of someone who works under the sun. Her floral cotton blouse, faded from many washes, contrasted sharply with the Italian marble of the entrance hall. Her jeans, with a discreet patch on the knee, completed the look of someone who clearly did not belong in this world of luxury. Two valets were chatting near the entrance. When Helen passed, they didn't even interrupt their conversation about the last Yankees game. Their eyes slid over her as if she were invisible, transparent, non-existent. The lobby of the Gilded Marina was a cathedral of opulence. Check crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting rainbows on the Carrara marble floor. Monumental floral arrangements perfumed the air with the scent of imported lilies. Paintings by renowned artists decorated the walls paneled in fine wood. Every detail whispered a single word: exclusivity. Helen crossed the main hall, her cloth suitcase looking even more humble against that backdrop. Her steps were firm but discreet. There was no rush in her movements, just a natural serenity that contrasted with the controlled frenzy of the guests in suits and designer dresses. At the reception, 3 clerks worked behind the black marble counter. Jessica, the youngest, looked up and managed a professional smile but was quickly intercepted by a sharp voice. "I'll handle this." Patricia Miller appeared like a hawk spotting its prey. At 38, she was the personification of elite hotel management. Her black hair was pulled into a bun so tight it seemed to stretch her forehead. The grey Armani suit fit her slim body perfectly. Her Louboutin heels clicked on the floor with precise, metallic, threatening taps. Her makeup was flawless. Perfect foundation, dark red lipstick, eyes lined with surgical precision. But it was her eyes that revealed her true nature. Cold, calculating, measuring, weighing, judging. And at that moment, they were scanning Helen from head to toe with a disdain so palpable it seemed to pollute the air. "Good afternoon," said Helen, her calm voice carrying the characteristic accent of the Midwest. "I'd like a room for 3 nights, please." Patricia didn't answer immediately. Her eyes continued their cruel inventory. Scarf on her hair, floral blouse, patched jeans, flat sandals, cloth suitcase. Every detail was catalogued, processed, judged, and condemned in seconds. "A room," Patricia repeated, making the word sound like a joke. She exchanged a look with Jessica, one eyebrow arched in silent mockery. "I see." Helen remained still, her hands resting gently on the marble counter. Her brown eyes remained serene, patient, as if she were used to waiting. "And do you have a reservation?" The pause before the last word was deliberate, loaded with insinuation. "No," Helen replied calmly. "I just arrived in New York today. Came straight from the airport. Straight from the airport, in an Uber." Patricia smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile. It was the smile of a predator. "How convenient." At that moment, the revolving doors opened, and a couple entered the lobby. The man wore a navy blue Brioni suit, the woman a Valentino dress that probably cost more than a small car. 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases followed behind them, pushed by a bellhop. Patricia transformed instantly. Her closed-off face broke into a radiant smile, her shoulders relaxed. Her voice took on a warm melody. "Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to the Gilded Marina. I'll get your check-in processed right away." She gestured to Jessica, without taking her eyes off the wealthy couple. "Jessica, take care of this situation here. I will attend to our preferred guests." Helen watched the transformation with clinical interest. There was no anger in her eyes, no hurt, just a deep understanding, as if she were reading a book whose ending she already knew. Jessica approached, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Let me check our availability." Her fingers typed quickly on the computer, as if wanting to end the awkward situation as fast as possible. "We have, well, at the moment we only have suites available. The rate is $3,200 a night." Helen nodded slightly, showing neither surprise nor hesitation. Patricia, who was attending to the wealthy couple but keeping an ear on the conversation, turned her head sharply. Her eyes gleamed with renewed malice. She murmured something quickly to the couple, probably an excuse, and walked back to where Helen stood. $3,200 a night, Patricia repeated, her voice now louder, projected so other guests in the lobby could hear. That's for 3 nights, correct? That comes to $9,600. In total. She let the information hang in the air like an accusation. I will need guarantees, of course, Patricia continued, her tone increasingly condescending. A credit card with a verified limit, identification, proof of address, proof of income. She paused for calculated effect. You understand, don't you? Our guests are typically people of a certain standard. The word standard dripped from her mouth, laced with venom. Helen remained serene. I understand perfectly. You do? Patricia tilted her head, feigning surprise. Because, you see, this is a 5-star establishment. Diamond-rated, actually. We have a reputation to uphold. We can't just accept anyone who... She gestured vaguely in Helen's direction, encompassing her entire appearance in a dismissive motion. An elegant older woman passing through the lobby slowed her pace, frowning at Patricia's tone. A man in a suit stopped rolling his briefcase, turning to watch the scene. Helen took a deep, calm breath. I can pay. Oh, you can? Patricia's smile was now openly cruel. Forgive my frankness, but she leaned over the counter, lowering her voice in a false conspiratorial intimacy that was still loud enough for onlookers to hear. You arrived in an Uber. You're dressed as if you've come from, well, I'm not sure where, but certainly not from a place that prepares someone to pay nearly $10,000 for a hotel stay. I understand your concern, Helen replied, her voice maintaining the same unnerving calm. I can provide all the necessary guarantees. Patricia straightened up, crossing her arms over her chest. Her dark red lipstick curved into a smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. You know what? She tilted her head, as if a brilliant idea had just struck her. I'll do something for you. I'm going to give you an opportunity. Helen waited, motionless. If you can manage to pay for our simplest room, $900 in cash right now, I will personally upgrade you to the suite, for free, as a gesture of goodwill. The lobby fell silent. The elegant woman let out a gasp of indignation. The man in the suit frowned, clearly uncomfortable. Jessica lowered her eyes, her cheeks burning. But Patricia was radiant, savoring her moment of power. She had set a perfect trap. If Helen couldn't pay, she would be humiliated and escorted out. If she could, which Patricia clearly doubted, well, she'd have her fun and could still create more obstacles. Helen looked into Patricia's eyes for a long moment. There was something in that serene gaze, a depth that made the manager blink first, feeling an inexplicable shiver run down her spine. And if I can't pay? Helen asked, her voice still calm, but now with a note of genuine curiosity. Patricia regained her composure, her smile widening. Then you will have to leave, through the service exit, of course. We can't have this sort of embarrassment in our main lobby. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, charged with expectation. All eyes were now fixed on Helen, the woman with the floral scarf, the cloth suitcase, the flat sandals. The woman who shouldn't be there. The woman who was about to be publicly humiliated. And then Helen did something no one expected. She smiled. It wasn't a smile of nervousness or embarrassment. It was a calm, almost tender smile, as if she were watching a child pull a prank. I accept your bet, she said, her firm voice echoing off the lobby's marble. Patricia blinked, momentarily surprised by the lack of hesitation, but she quickly recovered her mask of superiority. Wonderful. Then if you'll excuse me, I'll go get the security manager for when you can't pay. That won't be necessary, Helen replied, bending down to open her cloth suitcase. And it was in that moment, with all eyes fixed on that humble suitcase, that the real story was about to begin. Helen's fingers moved with deliberate calm over the zipper of the cloth suitcase. The metallic sound seemed to echo through the silent lobby of the gilded marina like a drumbeat signaling the start of a duel. Patricia crossed her arms, shifting her weight to one foot, her posture screaming impatience and disdain. I'll wait here as long as necessary, the manager declared, her voice loud enough to ensure her little audience didn't miss a thing. After all, a 5-star hotel must have patience for all sorts of situations. The elegant older woman watching the scene rolled her eyes and muttered something to her companion, clearly disapproving of Patricia's conduct. But the manager was in her element, fueled by the attention, intoxicated by the power she felt over this simple woman. Jessica, behind the counter, was biting her lower lip. Her fingers drummed nervously on the computer keyboard, wishing she were anywhere but there. She had worked with Patricia for 2 years and knew that dangerous glint in her eyes all too well. It was the look of someone who knew there was blood in the water and was about to attack. Helen opened the suitcase completely. Inside, simple clothes were neatly folded. More floral blouses, a cotton dress, a worn cardigan. Nothing impressive. Nothing to suggest wealth or sophistication. Patricia let out a short, triumphant laugh. "Oh, what a surprise," she purred sarcastically. "Clothes from a flea market. How chic." But Helen completely ignored the comment. Her hands, calloused from work, reached beneath the clothes and found a plain brown paper envelope. She pulled it out carefully and placed it on the marble counter. The envelope was slightly creased at the edges, used, nothing special. Patricia looked at it as if it were trash. "Is this serious?" She laughed again, looking to her small audience like a comedian seeking approval. "A brown envelope? What's next, a discount coupon?" But then Helen opened the envelope and started taking out money. They weren't crumpled or dirty bills. They were crisp $100 bills arranged in neat stacks, held together by rubber bands. 1, 2, 3, 4 stacks of bills emerged from the envelope like silent, irrefutable evidence. Patricia's smile faltered. Helen began to count, her hands moving with the efficiency of someone accustomed to handling cash. Her lips moved in a silent count as she separated the bills on the counter. 100, 200, 300, 400. "It must be fake," Patricia muttered. But her voice had lost its force. Her skin, once flushed with satisfaction, was beginning to lose its color. 500, 600, 700, 800. Jessica leaned forward, her eyes wide. The elegant woman took a step toward the counter, forgetting any pretense of discretion. The man in the suit let go of his briefcase handle, completely engrossed. $900, Helen announced calmly, pushing the organized stacks of bills toward Patricia. As requested, in cash. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air conditioning system seemed to have stopped, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Patricia stared at the money as if it were a venomous snake. Her hands, which had gestured with such confidence just moments before, now trembled slightly. She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. This doesn't prove anything," she finally managed to say. But her voice came out strange, high-pitched, defensive. "Anyone can scrape together $900. Maybe you saved up for months, maybe you borrowed it. Would you like me to count it again?" Helen asked, her voice maintaining that unnerving calm that seemed to make Patricia even more nervous. "To make sure there's no mistake?" "No." The word came out louder than Patricia intended. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. "That's not it, it's just, well, from your appearance, I never would have imagined that I would have $900? Helen finished the sentence for her without malice, merely stating a fact. It's understandable, appearances can be deceiving. The word deceiving hung in the air like a prophecy. Patricia picked up one of the bills, holding it up to the light as if looking for signs of forgery. The security thread was perfect. The texture was authentic. There was nothing wrong with the money except that it shouldn't be in the hands of this woman with a floral scarf and flat sandals. "I need to check your documents," Patricia said, her voice now official, bureaucratic, desperately trying to regain some control over the situation. "I can't accept payment without proper documentation." "Of course," Helen agreed, reaching back into her suitcase. This time, she pulled out a small clear plastic folder. Inside, documents were organized in individual sleeves. She laid them on the counter, one by one, like cards being revealed in a high-stakes poker game. A driver's license, a social security card, a bank card, another card, this one with gold corporate lettering, and then a professional ID card that made Jessica lean in for a better look. "American Veterinary Medical Association," Jessica read aloud, surprised. "Specialization in animal reproduction and genetic improvement." Patricia snatched the document from the receptionist's hands, her eyes scanning every line with growing unease. Everything was in order. Everything was legitimate. Each document was another small crack in her certainty, her judgment, her power. "You're a veterinarian?" The question sounded more like an accusation than a curiosity. "I'm a rancher," Helen corrected gently. "Veterinary medicine was my training. But for the last 28 years I've worked in cattle ranching, specifically with bovine genetic improvement." "Bovine genetic improvement," Patricia repeated, as if the words were a foreign language. She looked at the small audience that had formed, searching for allies, for validation, for anything that would restore her superior position. "That's Cows? You work with cows? Elite breeding stock, Helen explained patiently. I came to New York specifically for the auction tomorrow at the Javits Center. It's one of the most important events on the American livestock calendar. An auction of cows. Patricia pronounced each word slowly, as if explaining basic math to a child. You came to New York, you're staying in my hotel to go to an auction of cows. The way she said cows turned the word into something dirty, insignificant. Of breeding stock, Helen corrected again, her patience seemingly infinite. The difference is significant. Oh, of course, forgive me, Patricia laughed, and there was a hysterical edge to it. Breeding stock. So much more sophisticated than cows. She turned to Jessica. Write that down, Jessica. They're not cows, they're breeding stock. It makes all the difference. Jessica didn't laugh. Her eyes were fixed on Helen, and there was something in them. Respect, perhaps, or curiosity. She was beginning to realize that something was deeply wrong with this situation, that Patricia was climbing a mountain that could crumble beneath her feet. And how much does one of these breeding animals cost? Patricia asked, crossing her arms again, her defiant posture trying to hide her growing discomfort. Helen looked at her for a long moment before answering. It depends on the lineage, the genetic history, the improvement traits. Common breeding stock can cost a few tens of thousands of dollars. A few tens of thousands, Patricia repeated, and her smile returned, weaker but still there. Well, that's interesting, but the elite breeding stock, Helen continued, her voice still calm, still serene. Those with proven genetics, exceptional lineage, rare traits, those can reach hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions. The word millions dropped like a bomb. Patricia blinked, then blinked again. Her mouth opened slightly, as if the words were stuck somewhere between her brain and her tongue. Millions, she finally said, and it was impossible to tell if it was a question or a statement. You're telling me that a cow, breeding bull, can cost millions of dollars? Yes, it can, Helen answered simply. Patricia looked at the money on the counter. $900. A sum that, minutes ago, she had been absolutely certain Helen did not possess. But if the woman was talking about breeding bulls that cost millions, no, it was ridiculous, impossible. This woman in a floral scarf and flat sandals couldn't possibly be involved in million-dollar transactions. It was absurd. It was... You can check, Helen offered, interrupting Patricia's frantic thoughts. Livestock market values are public. Auction records are widely published. And it was then that Helen did something that would seal Patricia's fate. She took out her cell phone, a simple smartphone, nothing state-of-the-art, and unlocked the screen. If you'll allow me, she said, her voice polite, may I make a quick call to confirm some details about tomorrow's auction? Patricia nodded vaguely, still processing the information about million-dollar cows. Forgive her, breeding stock. Helen tapped the screen a few times and then put the phone on speaker. The sound of dialing echoed through the silent lobby. 1 ring, 2 rings. Doctor. Beatrice Oliveira, a female voice answered, professional, efficient. Good afternoon, Beatrice, Helen greeted. It's Helen. Sorry to bother you after business hours. Helen, the voice on the other end warmed immediately. No apologies needed. I was just reviewing the numbers for tomorrow's auction. Did you get to New York all right? I did. I'm at the Gilded Marina on Park Avenue. Ah, the hotel you acquired 3 years ago. Are you enjoying it? Patricia, who had been half listening to the conversation, froze. Her eyes widened. Her hands, which had been fiddling distractedly with a pen, stopped mid-air. Helen, however, continued as if nothing had happened. It's lovely, but I was calling to confirm. Did we transfer the reserve for tomorrow? The amount we discussed? It's already processed, Beatrice confirmed. I've left a considerable reserve in the checking account for your transactions at the auction. The rest of the investments are well diversified, as you asked. Oh, and your corporate card is cleared for unlimited transactions during your stay in New York in case you need anything. Perfect. Thank you, Beatrice. You're welcome, and good luck tomorrow. That Angus bull you had your eye on is magnificent. If you get him, it will be an incredible addition to the ranch. We'll see. Until tomorrow. Until then? Helen hung up and put the phone away, her movements unhurried, as if that call hadn't just completely changed the dynamic of the situation. The silence that followed was so thick it felt solid. Patricia was pale, not just white but ashen, as if every drop of blood had drained from her face, leaving only an empty shell where a confident manager once stood. Her hands were now visibly shaking. She looked at Helen, then at the money, then at Jessica. desperately searching for something that made sense, some explanation that would restore the order of the universe. That doesn't prove anything, she muttered, but her voice was broken, devoid of conviction. Anyone can ask someone to pretend to be their accountant. Anyone can... Patricia. Jessica's voice was low, urgent. I think you should... Shut up. The manager spun on her Louboutin heels, her eyes flashing with anger and fear. I didn't ask for your opinion. I'm the manager here, not you. The elegant older woman who had been watching made a noise of disapproval. The man in the suit shook his head, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding scene. Helen remained still, her hands resting calmly on the counter. And then she said, her voice low but clear, I can show you my bank statement if that would help. And before Patricia could respond, before she could refuse, before she could do anything to stop the inevitable, Helen was already pulling another document from her clear folder. The storm was just beginning, and Patricia Miller was about to find out that she had misjudged very, very badly. The paper Helen placed on the marble counter was nothing special at first glance. A standard letter-sized sheet, printed in black and white, with the logo of a major American bank at the top. But the contents of that paper were about to completely shatter Patricia's last defenses. It's right here, Helen said, turning the document so the manager could read it. I printed it before I left, just in case. Patricia stared at the paper as if it might bite her. Her hands, which had been trembling slightly before, were now shaking visibly. She swallowed hard, trying to summon her courage, and then forced her eyes to focus on the numbers. And then she saw it. The available balance in the checking account started with a 3, followed by 6 more digits. The decimal point was there, cold and mathematical, separating millions from cents. Patricia blinked again. She rubbed her eyes as if reality could be wiped away like a smudged mascara line. But the numbers remained, solid, real, impossible. This has to be, and she began, but her voice failed her. Her throat was so dry it felt like sandpaper. Jessica, unable to contain her curiosity, leaned over Patricia's shoulder. Her eyes widened. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to stifle a gasp of shock. The elegant woman, abandoning all pretense of politeness, moved right up to the counter. The man in the suit followed her. Other guests, sensing that something extraordinary was happening, began to gather in a hesitant semicircle. My goodness, murmured the elegant woman, having glimpsed the numbers. That can't be real. Look at that statement, someone whispered behind her. Patricia turned sharply, trying to block the view of the paper, but it was too late. The information had already escaped, spreading through the audience like wildfire. This is forged! Patricia finally found her voice, shrill and desperate. It has to be. Anyone can edit a document on a computer and print it out. This means nothing. But her voice lacked any conviction. It was the sound of someone drowning, grasping at anything that might keep her afloat. Helen remained calm, her hands still resting gently on the marble. Her brown eyes watched Patricia with an expression that could be described as pity. No, it wasn't pity. It was understanding. As if she had seen this scene before, as if she knew exactly how it would end. Down here, Helen said, her finger pointing to the bottom of the statement, is the direct number for my bank manager, Marcy Costa. Feel free to call and confirm the document's authenticity. She pushed her phone across the counter, the screen already showing the dialer. Patricia stared at the phone as if it were an instrument of torture. Her hands were shaking so badly now that she had to clasp them together to hide the movement. She knew, God, she knew she shouldn't make that call. She knew that every step she took was leading her deeper into an abyss from which there would be no return. But she couldn't back down now either, not with all those eyes fixed on her, not with Jessica watching with that look of growing horror, not with her reputation, her pride, her entire identity hanging by a thread. That won't be necessary, she said, trying to sound firm and failing miserably. I'm not going to... I'll call, the elegant woman offered suddenly, reaching for the phone. If you don't mind, my dear, she said to Helen, ignoring Patricia completely. I'm fascinated by this whole situation. Please, Helen invited, pushing the phone closer to the woman. No, Patricia practically shouted, reaching out to block her. This is completely inappropriate. We have protocols. Rules, we can't just... But the woman had already taken the phone. Her fingers, adorned with expensive rings, dialed the number efficiently. She put the phone on speaker, and the sound of dialing filled the lobby once again. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Chase Private Client Marcy Costa, Premium Relationship Manager. How can I help you? The voice was professional, polished, exactly what one would expect from a high-level bank manager. "Good afternoon," said the elegant woman, clearly enjoying herself. "My name is Celia Thompson. I'm here at the Gilded Marina Hotel on Park Avenue, and I'm with a client of yours, Mrs. Helen Peterson. She has presented a bank statement, and we would like to confirm its authenticity." There was a brief professional pause on the other end. "Helen Peterson, yes, I'm very familiar with the account. May I ask who is authorizing this verification? For privacy reasons, you understand." "Mrs." Thompson looked at Helen, who nodded. "Mrs. Peterson, it's me, Marcy." The voice on the phone continued. "Are you present, and do you authorize this confirmation?" "I am, Marcy," Helen replied calmly. "Could you confirm the current balance of the checking account?" "One moment, please." The sound of rapid typing came through the speaker. "Available balance in the checking account is..." And then she stated a number that made several people in the audience whisper in shock. "That is the balance updated as of this moment. You also have funds in investment accounts and other holdings, but that would be the immediately available amount." Patricia, who was still standing, staggered slightly. Her legs felt like they had turned to jelly. She leaned on the counter, her knuckles white from gripping the marble edge. "Thank you, Marcy," said Helen. "That was all." "At your service, Mrs. Peterson. Anything else, just call, and good luck at the auction tomorrow. I hope you get that exceptional breeding bull you mentioned." The call ended. The silence that followed was so profound that the sound of a water drop falling into one of the floral arrangements sounded like a thunderclap. Mrs. Thompson returned the phone to Helen with a satisfied smile. "Well," she said, turning to Patricia with a sharp gaze, "it seems you've made a considerable error in judgment." Patricia didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was in a panic, racing in frantic circles, searching for an escape, an explanation, anything that could salvage her position. "It could still be fraud," she finally muttered, but even she no longer believed what she was saying. "Rich people get defrauded every day. She could have stolen someone's identity. She could have..." "Patricia." Jessica's voice was low, urgent, almost desperate. "Stop, please. Just stop." But Patricia was beyond reason. She was like a cornered animal, biting and clawing even though she knew she was defeated. Helen watched it all with that unnerving calm. Then she glanced at the simple watch on her wrist. No Rolex or Patek Philippe, just a functional timepiece. "Look," she said gently, almost tenderly, "I understand this situation is uncomfortable, but it's getting late. I'm tired from my trip and I'd like to check in. So if you don't mind..." She pushed the $900 once more toward Patricia. "I believe I fulfilled my end of the bet. I've paid for the simplest room, in cash, as agreed." Patricia looked at the money, then at Helen, then at the small crowd that had formed. Maybe 15 people now, all silent, all watching, all waiting to see how this would end. And it was in that moment of hesitation, that second of charged silence, that the revolving doors opened again. A tall man entered the lobby, wearing a casual beige linen blazer over a light blue shirt. He was around 60, with well-cut grey hair, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to respect and privilege. An elegant woman accompanied him, wearing a flowing white dress. They were walking toward the reception desk when the man stopped abruptly. His eyes widened. A huge smile spread across his face. "Helen!" he exclaimed, his voice echoing through the hall. "Helen Peterson!" And in the same instant that name was spoken with such joy and familiarity, Patricia knew, with a cold, terrible certainty, that her nightmare was just beginning. Helen turned toward the voice, and a subtle but noticeable transformation took place on her face. Her eyes lit up with genuine recognition. Her smile, which had been polite but distant during the entire interaction with Patricia, became warm, real. "Frank," she responded, her voice carrying a joy she hadn't shown before. "What a wonderful surprise." The man strode across the lobby, his arms already open. The woman accompanying him was smiling too, clearly sharing his enthusiasm. And then, before Patricia's shocked eyes, before the fascinated audience now completely engrossed in the unfolding drama, the man hugged Helen as one hugs an old friend, someone dear, someone important. "It's been too long," he said, pulling back just enough to look at her with affection. "What, 2 years? Since that auction in Fort Worth?" "Just about," Helen agreed. "And you, always dapper, always on time." "My wife has an internal stopwatch," he laughed, turning to the woman beside him. "Darling, you remember Helen, don't you? We met her in Fort Worth." "Of course I remember." His wife took Helen's hands in a warm, familiar gesture. "How are you? And how is the ranch?" "The Green Hope Ranch is doing very well," Helen replied. "In fact, I'm here for the auction tomorrow. And you?" "Same here," Frank laughed. "Came specifically for those 3 exceptional quarter horses being auctioned. You know how I am with horses." "I know very well, and if I'm not mistaken, one of those quarter horses is from a line sired by a stallion you sold me 4 years ago." "Exactly. The Golden Emperor. See how his genetics have carried on. It's magnificent." They spoke with the ease of people from the same circle, the same world, a world of auctions, breeding stock, million-dollar investments, a world completely different from the one Patricia had imagined. The manager was frozen behind the counter. Her face had gone from pale white to a greenish hue. She looked from Helen to Frank and back to Helen as if watching a slow-motion tennis match. Jessica beside her had covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes were so wide they looked like they might pop out of their sockets. Frank only then seemed to notice where they were. In the lobby, in front of the reception desk, with a small crowd watching. He frowned slightly, looking around, sensing the strange atmosphere. "Sorry," he said, turning to Patricia for the first time. "Didn't mean to interrupt. We're checking in as well." Yes, sir, of course," Patricia managed to articulate, her voice coming out as a croak. "Welcome to the Gilded Marina. We have your reservation right here. The presidential suite as requested." Her voice was completely different now, deferential, respectful, almost subservient. The contrast with how she had treated Helen was so stark that several people in the audience exchanged meaningful glances. "Excellent," Frank said, but there was something in his tone, a subtle coldness that wasn't there before. His sharp, observant eyes scanned the scene, Helen standing calmly in front of the counter, her cloth suitcase still open, money scattered on the marble, the bank statement still visible, the crowd of onlookers. Something was wrong, very wrong. "Helen," he said slowly, "is everything all right? Why are you—" He looked at the money, the open suitcase, the obvious awkwardness of the situation. "Why haven't you checked in yet?" It was a simple question, innocent even, but it carried a weight, an implication. Why would a woman of Helen Peterson's caliber, whom he clearly knew and respected, be involved in such a strange scene? Helen smiled, and there was something in that smile. Not malice, but maybe anticipation. Like someone who knows the truth is about to emerge and can no longer be contained. "Well," she began, her voice maintaining that impossible calm, "there was a little misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Frank arched an eyebrow. Helen looked at Patricia, who was melting more by the second. "The manager here was concerned about my ability to pay for my stay," Helen explained, her voice factual, not accusatory. "So she proposed a bet. If I could pay $900 in cash for the simplest room, she would upgrade me to the suite for free." The silence that followed was so absolute that a pin dropping on the floor would have sounded like a gunshot. Frank blinked, then blinked again. His head turned slowly, very slowly, toward Patricia. The expression on his face was one of utter disbelief. "You made," he said, each word deliberate, careful, "a bet with Helen Peterson." It wasn't a question, it was a statement, laden with such disbelief it seemed to defy reality itself. Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound came out. She looked like a fish out of water, slowly suffocating. "Do you know who she is?" Frank continued, his voice rising slightly in volume, shock and outrage finally breaking through his composure. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" I didn't," Patricia finally managed to stammer. "She arrived, her appearance, I thought—" "You thought what?" Frank's voice was sharp now, sharp as broken glass. "That you could judge someone by their appearance? That you could humiliate a customer based on foolish prejudices?" He turned to the small audience, gesturing toward Helen with one hand. "This woman," he said, his voice carrying a weight of authority that silenced even the most distant whispers, "is Helen Peterson, owner of the Green Hope Ranch, one of the most respected cattle operations in the United States, one of the country's leading experts in bovine genetic improvement. A woman whose reputation and expertise are recognized internationally." Each word landed like a hammer blow. Jessica had stopped breathing. Mrs. Thompson was smiling with satisfaction. The man in the suit was shaking his head, clearly impressed. And Patricia was crumbling. I didn't know," she whispered, but her voice was swallowed by the moment. "You didn't know," Frank repeated, and there was real contempt in his voice now. "Or you didn't care to know. You decided to judge before you knew?" Frank's wife placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Frank, darling, maybe." But he continued, driven by the injustice of what he had witnessed. Helen isn't just a successful rancher. She revolutionized genetic improvement techniques. Her work is studied in veterinary universities around the world. She develops programs that are an international benchmark. He paused, letting the information sink in, and then delivered the final arrow. And you made a bet with her. A bet, as if she was someone who needed to prove her worth. Patricia was now so white, she looked translucent. Her hands clutched the counter so tightly her knuckles were red. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, to offer some excuse. But Frank wasn't finished. "How many other guests have you treated like this?" he asked, his voice low but penetrating. "How many other worthy people have you humiliated because they weren't wearing Prada or arriving in imported cars?" It wasn't a rhetorical question. He actually wanted to know. Patricia didn't answer. She couldn't. Because the truth, the horrible, undeniable truth, was that there had been others, many others. Each one judged, weighed and found wanting based on nothing more than superficial appearances. At that moment, a man in an impeccable suit approached the group. He was younger than Frank, maybe in his early 40s, carrying an executive leather briefcase. "Excuse me," he said, polite but firm. "I couldn't help but overhear. Are you Helen Peterson?" Helen turned to him, curious. "I am." The man extended his hand, his face lighting up in a professional smile. "Richard Stevens from Stevens and Associates Auctions. I've been trying to reach you all morning. Some early offers have come in for lots in tomorrow's auction, and we wanted to inform you before the event." Helen shook his hand. "Early offers?" "Yes. Several lots have already received bids in the millions. We want to ensure our top clients are aware before they decide on their bids." Millions. The word echoed through the lobby like a church bell. Richard continued, oblivious to the drama that had preceded his arrival. "Are you still interested in Lot 17, the Angus bull with the proven lineage? Because we have 3 interested parties, and the preliminary offers are already quite competitive." "Very interested," Helen confirmed. "It's exactly what I need to expand the improvement program at the ranch." "Excellent. Then we'll see you tomorrow at the Javits Center." Richard smiled again, then seemed to notice the strange atmosphere for the first time. "Sorry, did I interrupt something?" Frank let out a short, bitter laugh. "You could say that. Our friend Richard here," he said, turning to Patricia again, "has just confirmed what I was saying. Helen is one of the auction's biggest clients. Her acquisitions move impressive sums." Richard, realizing he had stumbled into a delicate situation, cleared his throat. "Well, yes. At the last auction in Fort Worth, Mrs. Peterson's acquisitions were quite substantial." He chose his words carefully. Too professional to reveal specific figures, but making it clear enough. Patricia finally managed to move. Her legs, which had been shaky, gave way completely. She half fell, half sat in the swivel chair behind the counter, her body collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut. Jessica moved toward her, concerned. "Patricia, do you need—" "I need—" Patricia whispered, but she couldn't complete the sentence. What did she need? An apology, forgiveness, a time machine? The audience had grown. Guests were coming from other areas of the hotel, drawn by the rumors that were spreading like wildfire. Staff peeked from doorways and hallways, witnessing the downfall of their manager. And at the center of it all, Helen remained calm, serene, as if she were the eye of a hurricane, the only still point while everything around her spun into chaos. But the worst was yet to come, because there was one final secret, one last revelation that would turn this humiliation into something monumentally devastating. And Helen was about to share it. Helen watched Patricia for a long moment. The manager was slumped in the swivel chair, her eyes fixed on the marble floor, unable to face any of the faces around her. The immaculate grey suit, once a uniform of power, now looked like a funeral shroud. The Louboutin heels, which had clicked with authority, were still defeated. The lobby had transformed into an impromptu theater. More than 30 people now surrounded the reception desk in a semicircle, all silent, all waiting. The energy in the air was thick, electric, like the seconds before lightning strikes. Helen took a deep breath, and something in her body language shifted. She was no longer just the humble, patient rancher. There was an authority emerging, subtle but undeniable, like a queen who finally decides to reveal her crown. "Before I accept the suite," she said, her voice quiet but carrying a new quality, command perhaps, or determination, "I need to clarify one last thing." Frank and Richard exchanged curious glances. Jessica, standing beside Patricia, looked up, intrigued. The audience collectively leaned forward, unable to resist the promise of more revelations. Helen bent down, and her hand dipped into her cloth suitcase for the last time. When it emerged, she was holding a brown leather folder. Not the clear plastic folder of personal documents, but something more substantial, more formal. The kind of folder that holds important documents, contracts, papers that change lives. She placed it on the counter with a soft but definitive thud. Pop, like a sentence being delivered. This folder, Helen said, her fingers resting lightly on the leather, contains several documents. Property certificates, deeds, contracts. She paused, her eyes meeting Patricia's for the first time since the manager had collapsed into the chair. Would you like to see what's inside? Patricia raised her head slowly, as if her neck were made of lead. Her eyes were red, her eyelids swollen. I think you should, Helen insisted gently. After all, it concerns you. A murmur rippled through the audience. Frank frowned, confused. Richard tilted his head, intrigued. Mrs. Celia Thompson, the elegant woman, smiled in anticipation, like someone who knew the grand finale was coming. Helen opened the folder and took out a document. It was official, letter-headed paper with seals and signatures. She held it for a moment, her eyes scanning the text as if reading it for the first time, though she clearly knew it by heart. This document, she said, turning it so Patricia could see, is a property deed recorded with the New York City Department of Finance. Patricia stared at the paper. Her eyes, still cloudy with emotion, tried to focus on the words. Date of record, property description, square footage, address, 1847. Park Avenue, New York, New York. Her brain processed the information slowly, as if wading through molasses. 1847, Park Avenue. That was... This address, Helen continued, her voice still calm but now with an inevitable weight, corresponds to the building where we are currently standing, the Gilded Marina Hotel, and the adjacent land. The silence that followed was so profound, it seemed to swallow all the sound in the world. Not the cars passing on Park Avenue, not the wind, not the breathing of 30 people, nothing. Patricia looked at the document, at Helen, back at the document. Her pupils were dilated. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish desperately trying to find oxygen. Owner, Helen read from the document, her eyes still on the page. Helen M. Peterson, Social Security number. She recited the full number. Date of acquisition, March 15th, 2022. Transaction value. She didn't complete it, leaving the information hanging. Frank, who was standing next to Helen, reached out a hand. May I? Helen passed him the document without hesitation. Frank read it in silence, his eyes scanning each line with professional care. He had dealt with enough properties in his life to recognize authentic documentation, and this was absolutely legitimate. Helen, he said slowly, a smile of disbelief and admiration forming on his face. You own this hotel? For 3 years now, she confirmed simply. The bomb had dropped. The impact was instantaneous and devastating. She owns the hotel? Someone in the audience shouted, a young woman with a New York accent. That's not possible, muttered someone else. Oh my God, whispered Jessica, her hands now completely covering her face. Patricia made no sound. She was beyond words, beyond reaction. Her face had gone from green to a white so pure it looked cadaverous. Her eyes were fixed on Helen with an expression of absolute horror, as if she were staring at the end of her own existence. Frank passed the document to Richard, who examined it with professional interest. This is authentic, Richard confirmed, his voice carrying surprise and respect. Clean title, no liens. But, Jessica finally found her voice, though it came out shaky and hesitant. We never knew. The management has always been handled through a hotel management company. No one ever said... That was the intention, Helen explained. When I acquired the hotel, it was undergoing an administrative restructuring. The previous group was in financial trouble, and I saw an investment opportunity. She paused, her eyes scanning the luxurious lobby. I've always loved this hotel. I stayed here for the first time 15 years ago, when I came to New York for a veterinary conference. The service was exceptional, warm, human. So when the opportunity to acquire it arose, I didn't hesitate. She turned to Patricia, and there was something in her eyes now. Not anger, not cruelty, but a deep sadness. Since then, Helen continued, I've followed monthly reports on the hotel's operations, customer satisfaction, quality of service, team performance, complaints, compliments. Everything comes to me. Through the management company, yes, but every report crosses my desk. Patricia made a strangled sound. She remembered the monthly reports. Of course she remembered. She wrote them herself. Carefully constructed reports, painting a perfect picture of efficiency and excellence. Reports that omitted complaints, inflated satisfaction numbers, and portrayed her as a flawless manager. Reports that were basically fiction. The reports you submitted, Helen said, and now there was a sharper edge to her voice, were very creative, Patricia. Very well written. Impressive customer satisfaction numbers. 0 complaints about discrimination or improper treatment. She tilted her head. Strange, isn't it? Because in the last 6 months, I've received 14 formal complaints from guests about differential treatment based on appearance or origin. 14. And none of them reached you curiously. Frank let out a low whistle. Richard shook his head, disapproving. The audience erupted in shocked whispers. The complaints came directly to the management company, Helen continued, and they reported them to me. But since you were the manager on site, it was assumed you were aware and handling the situation. Obviously, you weren't. I can explain, Patricia finally managed to say, her voice a desperate rasp. There were misunderstandings, overly sensitive guests. You can, Helen agreed, but you don't have to, because now I understand completely. She gestured to herself, to her simple clothes, her scarf, her cloth suitcase. I came to New York early this time specifically to check on the hotel personally, unannounced, unheralded, dressed like an ordinary person, not a millionaire owner, because I wanted to see with my own eyes how guests are truly treated when there's no expectation that they are important or wealthy. The implication was crystal clear. Patricia hadn't just failed a test she didn't know she was taking. She had revealed her true character. So all of this, Patricia whispered, tears now streaming freely down her face, ruining her perfect makeup, was a test, a trap. No, Helen replied, and there was absolute truth in her voice. It was a verification, and you didn't fail because of some elaborate trap. You failed because you chose to judge, humiliate, and belittle someone based purely on appearance. That wasn't a test. That was who you choose to be. The words landed like a final sentence. Patricia broke down completely, her face sinking into her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. All her power, all her arrogance, all her cruelty had crumbled, leaving only a broken shell. Frank placed a hand on Helen's shoulder, his expression a mixture of admiration and surprise. Helen, you are extraordinary. No, she disagreed gently. I'm just someone who believes that all people deserve dignity and respect, regardless of how they dress or how much money they carry. Richard nodded in agreement. That should be a basic tenet in any service establishment. Mrs. Thompson approached, her eyes shining with righteous satisfaction. I only regret not having my phone recording. This was better than any soap opera. A few in the audience laughed, a release of the tension that had gripped the lobby. But most were still in shock, processing the magnitude of what they had witnessed. And then Jessica did something brave. She approached Helen, her hands trembling, her eyes red with emotion. Mrs. Peterson, she said, her voice wavering but determined, I knew what Patricia was doing was wrong. I knew it, and I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. That makes me complicit. She took a deep breath. If you need to fire someone else besides her, I would understand. Helen looked at the young receptionist, assessing her with those serene, wise eyes. Did you object? She asked. I tried, several times, but Patricia was my superior. I was afraid of losing my job. Fear, Helen repeated thoughtfully. It's an understandable reason, though not an excuse. She paused, then smiled gently. But you've shown courage today. Admitting fault requires more strength than many imagine. Remember that. Jessica let out a sigh of relief, tears of gratitude welling up. And it was in that moment, that second of respite, that Helen prepared for the final decision, what to do with Patricia Miller, the manager who had humiliated her own owner, the woman who now awaited her fate, broken and exposed, at the center of a stage she herself had built. The judgment was about to begin. Helen stood for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the lobby that she now silently acknowledged as her own, the gilded Marina Hotel, with its crystal chandeliers, Italian marble, and promise of luxury, had been the stage for great injustice. But it would also be the stage for justice. She turned to Patricia, who was still slumped in the chair, her face hidden in her hands, her shoulders shaking. The woman who minutes ago had radiated power and arrogance was now just a broken echo of herself. "Patricia," Helen said, her voice firm but not cruel. "Look at me." It was a soft command, but a command nonetheless. Patricia slowly lifted her head, as if every inch of movement cost her agony. Her eyes were swollen and red, her makeup was smeared in black streaks down her cheeks. The dark red lipstick was smudged at the corners of her mouth. She looked as if she had aged 10 years in minutes. I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice broken. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You thought I didn't matter," Helen completed calmly. "You thought I was inferior, unworthy, someone who could be humiliated without consequence." "No," Patricia protested, but the denial was weak, unconvincing. "It wasn't. It was exactly that," Frank interjected, his voice sharp. He had been watching the scene with growing outrage, and now he could no longer contain himself. "You judged her purely on her appearance, decided she didn't belong to your precious standard." He made air quotes with his fingers. "And you publicly humiliated her for it." Richard nodded. "That isn't just unprofessionalism, it's deliberate cruelty." Mrs. Thompson crossed her arms, her expression severe. "How many other people have you treated like this? How many other guests have been made to feel small because they didn't meet your superficial expectations?" The audience murmured in agreement. Some shared looks that suggested they themselves, or people they knew, had experienced similar treatment in other establishments. Patricia shook her head weakly, as if she could deny the accusation through sheer motion. It wasn't always like this. I swear. This hotel is so elegant, so prestigious. I felt it was my responsibility to maintain the standard, to uphold the reputation." "At what cost?" Helen asked, and there was real sadness in her voice now. "At the cost of basic humanity, of respect, of dignity?" Patricia had no answer, because there was no answer that could justify what she had done. Helen took a deep breath, her eyes closing for a moment, as if gathering strength for what came next. When she opened them again, there was a resolve in them that hadn't been there before. "Patricia Miller," she said, and her voice now carried the formal authority of an owner speaking to an employee, "are you aware that your behavior today constitutes a severe violation of the fundamental values of this establishment?" Patricia nodded, unable to speak. "Are you aware that the reports you submitted monthly were, at best, grossly inaccurate and at worst deliberately falsified?" Another nod, weaker this time. "Are you aware that 14 formal complaints have been filed against your management, none of which you properly addressed?" The tears returned with full force. Patricia was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "I understand," she managed to say between sobs. "I understand everything, and I accept any consequence. Immediate termination, no notice, no references, I deserve it." The audience was tense. Some looked satisfied at the prospect of swift justice. Others looked uncomfortable at the utter breakdown of another human being. Helen looked at Patricia for a long moment. There was calculation in her eyes, but also something more. Consideration, perhaps. Even compassion. "Do you have a family?" she asked suddenly. The question caught Patricia off guard. Yes, a daughter. 8 years old, I'm divorced, it's just her and me." "And is this job your only source of income?" "Yes." The word came out as a desperate whisper. "Please, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but please consider my daughter. She's not to blame for my mistakes." Frank made a noise of disapproval. "She should have thought of that before she—" Helen raised a hand, silencing him. Her eyes never left Patricia's face. 3 years ago," Helen began, her voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear, "when I acquired this hotel, I had a vision. I wanted to create a place where every person was treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their origin, appearance, or bank account. I wanted it to be a beacon of true hospitality, not just superficial luxury." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Clearly, I failed to communicate that vision adequately. Middle management did not pass it down. And you," she looked at Patricia, "developed your own code of conduct based on personal prejudices." "I'm so sorry," Patricia repeated, a desperate mantra. "I'm so sorry." "You are sorry," Helen agreed. "But being sorry isn't enough. Action is what matters. Change is what matters." She crossed her arms, adopting a more formal managerial stance. "Patricia, you posed a question to me earlier. You asked if my appearance today would change my treatment at other times. The answer is it shouldn't, and that is exactly the point. Helen gestured to the crowded lobby. Every person who walks through those doors, whether in Louboutins or flat sandals, in Armani or floral cotton, deserves the same level of respect, the same standard of treatment. Yes, Patricia agreed fervently. Yes, you're absolutely right. I see that now. I swear I do. Seeing and understanding are different things, Helen noted. And understanding and changing are different still. The silence returned, thick with anticipation. The audience was barely breathing, awaiting the final sentence. Helen uncrossed her arms and placed her hands on the marble counter, leaning slightly toward Patricia. Firing you would be easy, she said thoughtfully. It would be just even. You violated fundamental principles, lied in reports, damaged the hotel's reputation. Any labor court would find your termination for just cause completely appropriate. Patricia closed her eyes, bracing for the final blow. But, Helen continued, and that one suspended word made Patricia's eyes fly open again, I didn't build my life and my success by being cruel when justice combined with mercy can be more effective. Frank turned to her, surprised. Richard raised an eyebrow. The audience murmured in confusion. You spoke of your daughter, Helen said, of responsibility, of how this job is all you have, and I believe you, not because you are particularly believable at this moment, but because I recognize true desperation when I see it. She straightened up, her decision clearly made. Therefore, here is what is going to happen. Patricia Miller, you will not be fired. A collective gasp went through the lobby. Jessica covered her mouth in shock. Frank opened his mouth to protest, but Helen silenced him with a look. However, she continued, her voice gaining an edge of steel, you will also not remain as the manager of this hotel. That position requires trust, integrity, and a genuine commitment to values you clearly do not currently possess. Patricia nodded, accepting. Anything was better than total unemployment, than the complete collapse of her life. You will be transferred, Helen announced, and everyone leaned forward, eager to hear where. To my ranch in Wyoming, the Green Hope Ranch. The shock on Patricia's face was absolute. A ranch? I don't know anything about ranches. Exactly, Helen said with a small smile. That's where you will learn. And then Helen outlined the plan that would change everything. The audience erupted in murmurs. Frank and Richard exchanged looks of surprise. Mrs. Thompson smiled, intrigued by the plot twist. Jessica just watched, wide-eyed, processing what was happening. Patricia, for her part, looked like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her hands, which had been clenched in despair, relaxed slightly. A tiny flicker of hope, so small it could have been imagined, crossed her devastated face. Green Hope Ranch? She repeated, her voice hoarse. Your ranch? My ranch, Helen confirmed, nodding slightly. She crossed her arms again, but this time the posture wasn't defensive. It was reflective, like someone explaining a carefully considered plan. You will work there as an administrative assistant. It's not a glorious position. In fact, it's significantly below what you have now. I don't know what to say, Patricia muttered. I'm not finished yet, Helen interrupted gently but firmly. Let me clarify exactly what this means, so there are no misunderstandings. She began to tick off points on her fingers, each one a clear, non-negotiable clause. First, you will relocate to Wyoming within 2 weeks. We will provide a small furnished apartment in town near the ranch where you can live with your daughter. The rent will be deducted from your salary. Patricia blinked, processing. Housing. She and her daughter would have a place to live. It wasn't generosity, it was practicality, but still it was something. Second, your salary will be adjusted to reflect your new position. It will be substantially lower than what you earned as a manager, but sufficient for basic needs. The flicker of hope wavered slightly, but Patricia nodded. Less money than before, but still a job, still a chance. Third, your responsibilities will include administrative work, yes, but also practical work. You will help with inventories, maintaining livestock records, coordinating transportation, and occasionally, Helen paused meaningfully, you will work directly in the fields, with the animals, on the land. The image was clear. Patricia, who lived in high heels and impeccable suits, would get her hands dirty, literally. Fourth, you will work under the direct supervision of my ranch foreman, Mr. Oswald. He is 62 years old, only has a grade school education, and knows more about honest work and character than any MBA could ever teach. You will answer to him, you will respect him, and you will learn from him. Frank let out a short laugh, appreciating the poetic irony. Richard smiled too. The reversal was perfect. The arrogant manager, who judged by appearance, would now answer to a man she would have despised in normal circumstances. Fifth, Helen continued, her voice softening slightly, you will have 1 year, 12 months to demonstrate genuine change, not just forced obedience, but real transformation. True humility, a deep understanding that a person's worth has nothing to do with their clothes, their bank account, or their social status. And after a year, Patricia asked, her voice so low it was almost a whisper. After a year, Helen replied, her eyes locked on Patricia's, if Mr. Oswald and others on the ranch report that you have truly changed, not just that you followed the rules, but that you've really internalized the lessons, then we will reevaluate. Perhaps you can return to the hotel industry, perhaps in a different position at a different establishment, or perhaps you'll discover you prefer a different life entirely. And if I fail, the words came out laden with fear. If after a year you and Mr. Oswald decide I haven't changed, then, Helen said simply, we will terminate your employment. No drama, no hard feelings, but definitively. Because there is no place in any organization I manage for people who treat others with cruelty or contempt. The sentence was complete, clear, structured, with defined expectations and explicit consequences. It wasn't blind mercy, it was justice with an opportunity. Real consequences, but also a chance for redemption. Patricia sat in silence for a long moment, processing every word. Her face went through a series of expressions. Shock, fear, hesitant gratitude, a slow understanding of the magnitude of what was being offered. Why? She finally asked, tears welling up again. But these were different, not of despair, but of genuine confusion. Why are you doing this? I was horrible to you. I humiliated you. You don't owe me anything, nothing. Why give me this chance? Helen took a moment before answering, choosing her words carefully. Because, she said finally, many years ago when I was starting my career I made mistakes. Different from yours, yes, but mistakes nonetheless. Bad judgments, misplaced pride, and someone, an old rancher named Mr. Johnson, gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it. He taught me that failure isn't the end, but how you respond to failure defines who you become. She moved closer to the counter, closing the physical distance between herself and Patricia. You made a grave mistake today, but I don't believe people are defined by their worst moments. I believe they can grow, change, become better, if they choose to. Helen extended her hand. The choice is yours, Patricia, to accept this opportunity, work hard, and transform yourself, or to refuse and go your own way. Patricia looked at the offered hand for a long moment. It was a hand marked by work, light calluses, slightly rough skin, short, functional nails. It was the hand of someone who didn't just command but worked, who didn't just judge but served. Slowly, tremblingly, Patricia reached out her own hand, once flawless with a French manicure, now with chipped polish and trembling fingers, and shook Helen's. I accept, she whispered. I accept, and I swear I will change. I will prove I deserved this chance. Not to me, Helen corrected gently, still holding Patricia's hand. Prove it to yourself, to your daughter, to all the people you will meet and treat with respect from now on. They remained like that for a moment, hands clasped, a humble woman who happened to be a millionaire and an arrogant manager who had just lost everything but had perhaps, just perhaps, gained a chance to rebuild something better. The audience watched in respectful silence. Mrs. Thompson dabbed at her eyes discreetly. The man in the suit nodded in approval. Jessica smiled, genuinely hopeful. Frank came forward, placing a hand on Helen's shoulder. You are an extraordinary woman, Helen. Few would have such grace. It's not grace, Helen replied, finally releasing Patricia's hand. It's an investment in the human capacity for change. Sometimes it fails, but when it works, she smiled, when it works, you transform, not just one life, but all the lives that person will touch from now on. Richard approached as well, clearly impressed. I must say, Mrs. Peterson, in all my years working with high-net-worth individuals, I have rarely seen someone handle a situation like this with such wisdom and composure. Net worth, Helen said thoughtfully, is less about what you have in the bank and more about what you carry in your character. Money opens doors, yes, but it's your values that determine what you do when you walk through them. She turned to Jessica, who had been watching everything with a mixture of awe and nervousness. Jessica, Helen said, you showed courage today by admitting silent complicity. That's easier said than done. Therefore, I'd like to offer you the position of interim general manager of the Gilded Marina. Jessica nearly choked. Me? But I don't have enough experience. I've only worked here 2 years. You have something more valuable than experience, Helen interrupted. You have a conscience. You know the difference between right and wrong, even when you're afraid to act. And you can learn the rest. Do you accept? Jessica glanced at Patricia, who nodded encouragingly through her tears. Then she looked back at Helen, her eyes shining with renewed determination. Yes, she said firmly. Yes, I accept. And I promise I will make this hotel the place you always wanted it to be. Good, Helen smiled. Then, how about we finally get me checked in? I'm exhausted and the auction is early tomorrow. The tension finally broke. The audience laughed, the sound liberating, washing away the drama and intensity of the last few hours. People began to disperse, returning to their rooms, their dinners, their lives, but each carrying the story they had witnessed. Jessica moved quickly behind the computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The presidential suite is available, Mrs. Peterson. The best view of the park. And, she hesitated, it's on the house, of course. As the owner. Absolutely not, Helen said firmly. I will pay the full rate. I need to know if the prices we're charging are fair. She winked. Besides, I technically won a bet that guaranteed me a free suite. The comment drew genuine laughter from everyone present. Even Patricia managed a weak smile. But there was one last piece of the puzzle. One final lesson that needed to be taught, witnessed, and etched into the hearts of everyone present. Helen reached for the $900 that still lay on the marble counter. The bills Patricia had reluctantly accepted as proof of payment. Jessica, Helen said, pushing the money toward the new interim manager. Use this for something important. A training session on true hospitality for the entire hotel staff. Not about how to serve the rich, about how to serve people. All people. Jessica accepted the money with reverence, as if they were sacred relics. I will organize the best training session New York has ever seen. I know you will, Helen replied. And then something unexpected happened. Patricia rose from the chair where she had been slumped. Her legs still shook, but she forced herself to stand. She smoothed down her rumpled suit in a habitual gesture, trying to reclaim some shred of dignity. She walked up to Helen, and, to the shock of everyone present, bowed her head in a deep, respectful nod. Thank you, she said, her voice broken but sincere. Thank you for the second chance I didn't deserve. I promise, in front of all these witnesses, that I will not waste it. Helen placed a hand on Patricia's shoulder, gently urging her to stand straight. Patricia, she said, looking her in the eye, everyone deserves a chance at redemption. What you do with that chance is entirely up to you. But know this, I will be rooting for your success. Genuinely. And in those simple words, Patricia finally understood the magnitude of what she had received. Not just a job, not just a chance, but a true demonstration of humanity at its finest. The last tears fell, but these were of gratitude, of real humility, of an understanding that was just beginning to form. The lobby had been transformed. It was no longer just a space of transaction and judgment. It was a testament that justice and mercy could coexist, that consequences could come with opportunity, that even the deepest falls could be the first step toward a true ascent. But the story wasn't over yet, because while one journey of redemption was just beginning, another was about to reach its expected climax, and tomorrow would bring revelations that no one in the audience could possibly imagine. The presidential suite on the 12th floor of the Gilded Marina was exactly what one would expect from a 5-star diamond hotel, a masterpiece of design and comfort. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of Manhattan, Central Park, spreading out like a green carpet, the city's iconic skyline, the Hudson River stretching to the horizon, where the sun was beginning its golden descent. Helen entered carrying her cloth suitcase, politely refusing the help of the bellhop who insisted on taking it. I've carried this suitcase for 30 years, she had said with a gentle smile. I'm not going to stop now. She placed the suitcase on the carved mahogany luggage rack and walked to the panoramic windows. The afternoon sun painted the city in shades of gold and amber. Taxis flowed like a yellow river. Couples strolled through the park. Children built dreams destined for the next big adventure. It was beautiful, peaceful, and a world away from the emotional chaos she had just orchestrated in the lobby. Helen took a deep breath, resting her hands on the cool glass. Her eyes closed for a moment, and the mask of serenity she had maintained for hours finally wavered. Her shoulders dropped slightly, the tension releasing in silent waves. She had planned it. Of course she had. The 14 complaints weren't a coincidence. They were a pattern that demanded personal verification. So she had come early, dressed deliberately simply, to see with her own eyes how ordinary guests were treated. But even with the planning, even expecting discrimination, the reality had been worse than she had imagined. The loud cruelty, the public bet, the deliberate humiliation. Patricia hadn't just failed a test. She had revealed a systemic cruelty that had likely been operating for years. How many others? Helen murmured to herself, looking out at the city without really seeing it. How many other people were made to feel small, unworthy, invisible? Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Beatrice, her accountant. Saw you arrived safely. Transfer for the auction confirmed. Good luck tomorrow. And I hope you liked the hotel that you insisted I not prepare for your arrival. Helen smiled. Beatrice knew the plan, of course. She had tried to talk her out of it. You're one of the wealthiest women in America, Beatrice had argued. Why subject yourself to that? Send professional inspectors. Because, Helen had replied, I want to see with my own eyes. I want to feel what others feel. And I want whoever is failing to know that they failed not against a statistic, but against a real person. Another knock at the door. Helen turned, composing herself again. Come in. It was Jessica, carrying a tray with fresh fruit and a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket. But her eyes were red, and she hesitated at the threshold as if unsure she had permission to enter. Mrs. Peterson, she said, her voice still trembling, I brought the house welcome. I know you said you would pay for everything, but this is protocol for all presidential suites. Thank you, Jessica. You can put it there. Helen gestured to the coffee table in front of the Italian leather sofa. Jessica entered, placed the tray down carefully, and then just stood there, clearly wanting to say something, but lacking the courage. What is it? Helen asked gently. I have to ask, Jessica began, her words rushing out nervously. Do you really think I can do this? Be a manager. I've never managed anything besides reservation spreadsheets. I don't know how to handle vendors, budgets, crises, entire teams. Helen interrupted her with a soft gesture. Do you know any manager who was born knowing all of that? No, but nothing. You learn by doing, and by making mistakes, and by correcting them, and by growing. Helen approached, her eyes fixed on Jessica's. But more important than technical skills, which you can learn, you have something that can't be taught. A moral conscience, empathy, the ability to see other people as people, not as statistics or stereotypes. Patricia didn't have that, Jessica murmured. No, but maybe she'll learn, or maybe not. That's up to her now. Helen placed a hand on the young woman's shoulder. You, however, already have the foundation. The rest is just construction. Jessica bit her lip, tears threatening to fall again. Thank you. Thank you for trusting me when you have no reason to. I have every reason, Helen corrected. I saw how you treated every guest with respect, even when Patricia despised them. I saw how uncomfortable you were with the injustice, even when you were afraid to speak up. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. The rest is technique. After Jessica left, Helen finally allowed herself to relax. She took off her sandals, letting her bare feet sink into the soft Persian rug. She poured herself a glass of mineral water, ignoring the champagne. She ate a few grapes, savoring the simple sweetness. Then she opened her cloth suitcase for the last time that day. Underneath the simple clothes, beneath the official documents, was a thin black leather folder. Helen took it out and opened it on the king-sized bed. Inside, photographs, dozens of them. The first showed a young girl, maybe 18, wearing work overalls, her hair in braids, smiling next to a newborn calf. It was Helen, 3 decades ago, when she was just a newly graduated veterinarian with more dreams than money. The second showed the same woman, a few years older, next to Mr. Johnson, the old rancher she had mentioned. He was an older black man, his hair white as cotton, his huge hands calloused from work, and he was smiling at her with paternal pride. You gave me a chance when no one else would, Helen whispered to the photograph, her fingers tracing the outline of the old man's face. When everyone said a woman couldn't make it in ranching, that I was too young, too inexperienced, too idealistic. More photos. The ranch in its early years. Small, modest, but clean and well cared for. Then bigger still. Award certificates, newspaper clippings about genetic innovations, photos from international conferences where she presented her research, and finally, a recent photo of her and Beatrice in front of the Gilded Marina on the day they signed the acquisition papers. 3 years ago. Both smiling, knowing they were investing not just in property, but in a legacy. Helen put the photos away carefully. They were her anchor, reminders of where she had started, what she had overcome, and who had been kind when they didn't have to be. And now, she said to the empty room, I hope I'm doing the same, being kind when I don't have to be, giving chances when it would be easier not to. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Frank. Helen, I just told my wife the whole story. She is shocked and impressed in equal measure. Want to have dinner with us? The hotel restaurant at 8? We can discuss strategy for the auction tomorrow. Helen smiled and typed her reply. I'd love to. See you at 8. She walked to the window again, watching the sun touch the horizon. The sky was on fire. Oranges, reds, deep purples. It was the kind of sunset that made people stop and look, reminding them that beauty cost nothing and was available to anyone who chose to see it. Tomorrow, she said to herself, tomorrow it's back to work, to the auction, to business, but today we did something important. And for the first time since she had walked into the lobby of the Gilded Marina hours ago, Helen allowed herself a full smile, not the polite smile she had given Patricia, not the encouraging smile for Jessica, but a smile of genuine satisfaction. Justice had been served, but more importantly, mercy had been offered, and maybe, just maybe, a life would be transformed. It was all she could hope for from a day that had begun with deliberate humiliation and would end with tentative hope. The panoramic restaurant on the top floor of the nearby hotel was a bubble of elegance suspended over the city. Spaced-out tables ensured privacy, candles floated in glass containers, a pianist played softly, each note falling like a drop of honey. Helen arrived exactly at 8, now wearing a simple but elegant beige linen dress, still not designer but appropriate for the setting. Her hair, free from the scarf, fell in grey waves to her shoulders. She wore only a simple pearl necklace, a gift from Mr. Johnson years ago, more sentimentally valuable than financially. Frank and his wife Marcy were already seated. He stood immediately upon seeing her, smiling broadly. Helen, you look beautiful. Frank always exaggerates with compliments, said Marcy, also rising to hug Helen. She was an elegant woman of about 55, with short blonde hair and intelligent blue eyes. But in this case he's right. You look radiant. They sat, and a waiter appeared instantly with water, wine, and leather-bound menus with gold lettering. So, said Marcy, leaning forward with obvious fascination, Frank told me everything. And when I say everything, I mean every delicious detail of this afternoon. But I want to hear it from the source. Did you really plan all of this? Helen accepted a glass of white wine before answering. Plan is a strong word. I created an opportunity to see the truth. What happened after? Well, that was Patricia's choice. But you knew she would discriminate, Marcy pressed. The 14 complaints. You knew the kind of person she was. I suspected, Helen corrected. But suspicion isn't certainty. I needed to see it for myself, to feel it for myself. Because when you manage something from a distance, numbers and reports can mask reality. Only when you're there, when you're the target of the behavior, do you truly understand the impact. Frank raised his glass. A toast, then, to the wisest and bravest woman I know, and to justice served with class. They toasted, the crystalline sound of the glasses echoing their small celebration. But I have to ask, said Frank, lowering his glass, why not just fire her? Why offer the transfer to the ranch? Most people in your position would have... Would have what? Helen interrupted. Completely ruined her life, left her and her daughter without support, proven that cruelty can be answered with greater cruelty. It's not cruelty, Frank argued. It's consequence. There's a line, Helen said thoughtfully, swirling the wine in her glass, watching the golden waves. A very fine line between just consequence and disguised revenge. Firing Patricia would be just, yes, but it would also be easy. And rarely are the easy things the right things. Marcy watched her intently. Do you really think she can change? Honestly? Helen paused, considering. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. But here's what I do know. If I don't give her the chance, I'll never find out. And she certainly will never find out. At least this way there's a possibility. A possibility, Marcy repeated. That's a powerful word. It's the only word that matters, Helen replied. Without possibility there is no growth. Without possibility there is no redemption. Without possibility we are all just the sum of our worst moments. The dinner continued. A salmon carpaccio appetizer, a main course of grilled sea bass with vegetables, a chocolate lava cake for dessert. But the conversation was the real main course. Frank told stories of past auctions. Marcy shared anecdotes from international travels. Helen listened more than she spoke, contributing only when prompted, her quiet nature contrasting with the couple's extroverted energy. But then during coffee, Marcy asked a question that completely changed the tone. "Helen, may I ask something personal?" "Of course. Why did you never marry?" "Forgive me if I'm being nosy, but—" Marcy hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "It's just that you're such an incredible woman. Successful, kind, wise, and always alone. I've never seen you with a partner at any event." Frank touched his wife's arm. "Marcy, honey, maybe—" "It's all right," Helen interrupted gently. She smiled, but there was a melancholy to it. "It's a fair question. The answer is complicated." She drank her coffee slowly, gathering her thoughts. "There was someone, once, a long time ago. Charles. He was also a veterinarian, also passionate about animals, also dreamed of ranches and bovine genetics." Her hands wrapped around the cup, seeking warmth. "We met in college. We planned our life together, the ranch we would build, the innovations we would develop, the children we would have." "What happened?" Marcy asked softly. "Mr. Johnson happened," Helen replied, and there was a sad irony in her voice. "The old rancher who gave me my first chance. He offered me a position on his ranch, veterinary assistant, minimum wage, but with the promise of learning everything he knew about cattle ranching." "And Charles?" "Charles had a different offer, an established veterinary clinic in Chicago. Good pay, stability, prestige." Helen paused. "He wanted me to go with him, to take a job in the city, to give up the dream of the ranch. Be realistic," he said. "Women can't make it in ranching. It's a man's job." Frank made a noise of disapproval. Marcy shook her head, indignant. "So I had to choose," Helen continued, "the man I loved or the dream that defined me, and I chose the dream." She smiled, but there was an old pain in it. "Charles left for Chicago, eventually married another veterinarian. They have 3 kids now, a very successful clinic, a good life. And you have the Green Hope Ranch," said Marcy, "and international recognition, and success that most people only dream of." "I do," Helen agreed, "but there are nights, especially during lonely winters, when I wonder about the children I never had, the dinner table conversations that never happened, the growing old together I never experienced." "Do you regret it?" Marcy's question was direct, blunt. Helen took a long moment before answering. "No," she said finally, and there was certainty in her voice. "Because the alternative would have been to betray who I am, to be less than I could be, to live half a life to accommodate someone who couldn't accept my whole self." She looked at Marcy directly. "Loneliness hurts, but self-betrayal, that destroys." The silence that followed was respectful, contemplative. "That's why you gave Patricia a chance," Frank realized suddenly, "because you know what it's like to have to choose between who you are and who others want you to be." "Perhaps," Helen admitted. "Or perhaps I just believe everyone deserves the opportunity to become better versions of themselves, even when, especially when, they have failed spectacularly." Marcy reached her hand across the table, taking Helen's. "You are an extraordinary woman, Helen Peterson, and if Charles couldn't see that, the loss was entirely his." "Thank you," Helen whispered, squeezing back. The rest of the dinner was lighter. They laughed at funny stories. They discussed strategies for the next day's auction. They made plans for future visits. But as they said their goodbyes in the hotel lobby, Frank pulled Helen aside. "What you did today," he said quietly, his eyes serious, "goes beyond hotel management or labor justice. You taught a lesson, that woman, and everyone who witnessed it will never forget. About consequences, yes, but more about grace, about second chances, about how true power isn't used to crush but to lift up. Power," Helen said thoughtfully, "is the most dangerous tool there is, because how you use it defines not just the fate of others, but the state of your own soul." Frank hugged her. "See you at the auction tomorrow, and Helen, Mr. Johnson would be very proud." As Helen rode back to the gilded marina in the Uber, watching the illuminated city pass by the window, she thought about the day, about Patricia, about Charles, about choices and consequences, and roads not taken, and she realized something. She regretted nothing. Not the choices she had made, not the loneliness she sometimes felt, not the decision to give Patricia a second chance, because in the end, it all came down to one simple truth. You don't control how others treat you, but you have complete control over how you treat others in return. And that, Helen decided as the Uber pulled up in front of the brightly lit hotel, was the only thing that really mattered. The sun had barely risen when Helen woke up, Her internal rancher's clock didn't recognize concepts like sleeping in or vacation. 5:30 in the morning was time to start the day. Always had been, always would be. She got up, did some simple stretches by the window while watching New York awaken. Joggers already dotted the park paths. Surfers checked the waves. Street vendors set up their carts for another day's work. After a quick shower, Helen dressed carefully. Not the simple clothes of yesterday. Today was a business day. Navy blue dress pants, a white silk blouse, a well-cut grey blazer, comfortable yet elegant closed-toe shoes, hair pulled back in a professional bun, light but present makeup. When she went down for breakfast at 7, a few guests recognized her from yesterday's drama. There were whispers, curious glances, but also respectful smiles. An elderly man nodded at her with obvious approval. A young woman murmured "inspiration" as she passed. Jessica was in the lobby, clearly having arrived earlier than necessary, wanting to make a good impression on her first day as interim manager. "Mrs. Peterson," she approached quickly, "good morning. I hope you slept well. The coffee is excellent today. We made sure that—" Helen raised a hand gently, smiling. "Jessica, breathe. It's okay. You don't have to be perfect. Just be yourself, work hard, and learn from your mistakes when they happen. Because they will happen." "Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I'm nervous." "I know. It's normal. But nervousness can't paralyze action. Use it as fuel, not as a brake." At breakfast, Helen found Frank and Marcy already eating. They waved for her to join them. "Ready for the big day?" Frank asked, biting into a croissant. "Always," Helen replied, pouring herself a strong black coffee. "Did you check last night's updates?" "Yes. 3 new lots were added. And that Angus bull you were eyeing. 2 new bidders have emerged. The competition is going to be fierce." "Good," Helen said, and she truly meant it. "Competition means we're all raising our standards. That benefits the whole industry." Marcy watched her with admiration. "You don't get nervous? Bids that could reach millions of dollars?" Helen shrugged. "Nervousness is fear of the unknown, but I know my numbers. I know my limits. I know the value each animal brings to my improvement program. So it's not a gamble or an impulse. It's a calculated investment." At 8 o'clock sharp, they left for the Javits Center. The event complex was immense, modern, capable of hosting tens of thousands of people. But the auction pavilion was more intimate, perhaps 500 chairs arranged in a semicircle around a central arena where the animals would be presented. When Helen entered, several acquaintances greeted her, breeders she had known for decades, veterinarians who had studied her methods, international buyers who had traveled specifically for access to the American gene pool. And there, near the stage, was Richard Stevens from the auction company. He saw her and approached immediately, a professional smile in place. "Mrs. Peterson, good to see you. Did you review the updated catalogue I sent last night?" "I did. Lots 17, 23, and 37 are of primary interest. Lots 5 and 42 are secondary." "Excellent. Allow me to be direct. Lot 17 has a lot of interest. We are anticipating aggressive bidding, prepared for serious competition. Always." The auction began at 9. The auctioneer was a man with a strong voice and a rapid rhythm, each number chanted in a hypnotic progression. Lot after lot was presented, each animal a genetic masterpiece, each bid a testament to value. Helen watched the first few lots without participating, just calibrating the room, feeling the rhythms, identifying serious competitors versus curious onlookers. Then came Lot 17. A magnificent Angus bull entered the arena. A shiny black coat, perfect musculature, a calm but alert temperament. The auctioneer began his presentation, detailing lineage, genetic traits, reproductive performance. "Lot 17. We'll start at $50,000. 50? 50? A paddle went up. 50,000. 60. 60,000. Who'll give me 60? Helen calmly raised her paddle. 60,000. 60 with the lady? 70? 70,000? Another paddle from a man in a suit at the back. 70,000. 80. Frank entered the bidding. 90. The man in the suit countered. 100,000. Helen, her voice calm but clear. The pace quickened. 110, 120, 150, 200. Bidders dropped out one by one, unable to keep up. Finally, it was down to Helen and a breeder she didn't know. A young man, maybe 40, with hungry eyes and the determination of someone building something new. 300,000, he shouted, sweat glistening on his forehead. Helen didn't hesitate. 350,000. 400. He was getting desperate now, bidding in larger increments, trying to scare Helen out of the competition. But Helen knew this game. She knew the numbers. She knew the value. She knew her limit. 450,000, she said calmly, as if she were commenting on the weather. The young breeder looked at her, then at the bull, then at his wife sitting beside him. She shook her head minimally. Too high. They had already passed their budget. 450,000 going once, going twice. The auctioneer scanned the room with sharp eyes. Sold to Mrs. Helen Peterson of the Green Hope Ranch. Applause erupted, not just polite but enthusiastic, because everyone there knew what it meant. The bull was going to one of the best improvement programs in the country. Its genetics would be used wisely, multiplied, improved. It was a victory not just for Helen, but for the entire industry. Frank leaned over. 450,000, you didn't even blink, because I know he'll generate 10 times that in genetic value over the next few years, Helen replied. It's not an expense. It's an investment. The auction continued for hours. Helen won 2 of the 5 lots she wanted, losing the others to bids that exceeded her calculated limit. In total, she spent about $800,000, a fortune for most. For her, a normal day of business. When it was all over, Richard found her again. Congratulations, Mrs. Peterson. Excellent acquisitions. May I ask, are you interested in attending the international auction next month in Houston? Some exceptional European breeding stock will be available. Send me the details. If the genetics justify the trip, I'll be there. As Helen was leaving the pavilion, her phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Mrs. Peterson, sorry to bother you, but a situation has come up that I need guidance on. A guest is unhappy with their room. He's demanding a free upgrade because he's not the kind of person who stays in standard rooms. How should I proceed? Helen smiled. Jessica's real test had come sooner than expected. She typed her reply. Politely explained that all of our rooms meet the same standard of excellence, just with different sizes. Offer to show him the suite so he can see what it includes, with the corresponding price. If he cannot or will not pay, the room he booked will be wonderful, but do not give in to pressure based on kind of person. That is exactly what we are trying to change. Jessica's reply was immediate. Understood. Thank you. Helen put her phone away, satisfied. Jessica was learning, the hotel was learning. Slowly, a different culture was being built, and somewhere Patricia was probably preparing for her move to Wyoming, for a completely different life, for a test that would determine not only her professional future, but the kind of person she would choose to be. The story was far from over, but it was progressing exactly as it should. Wyoming greeted Patricia as it greeted all newcomers, with scorching sun, hard work, and zero tolerance for urban illusions. The Green Hope Ranch stretched over acres of rolling land, green pastures dotted with Angus, Hereford, and crossbred cattle. Immaculate fences divided areas. Modern corrals gleamed with cleanliness. A modest but comfortable ranch house served as the administrative center. And overseeing it all with the quiet authority of someone who had lived every second of his 62 years working the land was Mr. Oswald. He was exactly as Helen had described, a black man, with completely white hair cut very short, his huge hands marked by calluses and scars from decades of work. He wore a simple plaid shirt, faded jeans, and worn but well-cared-for leather boots. His voice was deep, measured, each word chosen with the care of someone who had learned that silence often speaks louder than chatter. Patricia arrived on an April morning, a ranch driver picking her up from the small apartment Helen had arranged in town. She brought only 2 suitcases. Her city life of suits and high heels had no place here. "You're Patricia," Mr. Oswald said when she got out of the truck. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "Yes, sir." The formality was automatic. Something about Mr. Oswald commanded respect without demanding it. "Mrs. Peterson told me about you." He watched her with eyes that had seen much, judged much, and were now sizing up another soul. "She told me what you did, and she told me why you're here." Patricia looked down, shame burning her cheeks. "I understand if you don't want to work with me. I don't even want to work with me." To her surprise, Mr. Oswald laughed, a low, rough sound like rolling stones. "Girl, if I only worked with perfect people, I'd be working alone, and loneliness is the worst company." He gestured to the ranch house. "Come on, I'll show you where you'll be, what you'll be doing, and what I expect from you." The administrative office was simple. 3 desks, basic computers, metal filing cabinets, walls with maps of the property and production charts. A young woman was typing at one of the computers, Marina, an administrative assistant for 3 years, with a degree in zoology. "Marina, this is Patricia. She'll be working with us starting today." Marina looked at Patricia with curiosity, but no hostility. "Hi, welcome. Need help with anything?" Thank you. Yes, I need help with everything. I don't know anything about ranches." "Everyone starts out knowing nothing," Marina said with a smile. "The trick is not to pretend you know when you don't. Mr. Oswald can smell a lie from a mile away." "That's true," Mr. Oswald confirmed, sitting down heavily in his chair. "And since we're setting rules, I'll be direct, Patricia. You're not a manager here, you're not a superior, you're a beginner. You'll do what I say when I say how I say. You'll make mistakes because everyone does. When you make a mistake, you'll own it, learn from it, and fix it. You won't make excuses, you won't blame others, you won't pretend it didn't happen, understood?" "Yes, sir." "Second, everyone here works, no matter the position. If there's cow manure to shovel and no one else is available, you shovel it. If there's a fence to mend and we need extra hands, you help. This place runs because everyone contributes, not because some give orders and others obey." "I understand." "Third, you will treat every single person here, from me to the boy who cleans the pens, with the same respect. No exceptions, no distinctions, no judging by appearance, education, or any other superficial nonsense. On this ranch, worth is measured by character and work, nothing else." Every word was a direct arrow to the heart of Patricia's mistakes. She nodded, unable to speak. "And fourth," Mr. Oswald leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers, "Mrs. Peterson has given me full authority over you. I report to her monthly. If I think you're not genuinely changing, that you're just faking it, just biding your time, I'll tell her, and you're out. Simple as that. So don't waste my time, don't waste your time, and definitely don't waste Mrs. Peterson's time. She gave you something precious you didn't deserve, a second chance. Don't throw it away." "I won't," Patricia whispered. "I promise I won't." The first few days were brutal, not physically but psychologically. Patricia, used to giving orders, now took them. Used to judging others, now was constantly evaluated. Used to being in control, now controlled nothing. Her initial work was simple: processing cattle documentation. Each animal had a record: birth, vaccinations, weigh-ins, medical treatments, lineage, reproductive performance. Patricia spent hours entering data, checking numbers, organizing files. It was tedious, it was humbling, it was necessary. And slowly, through the repetitive work, something began to happen. As she typed information about Hurricane 847, she began to see not just a number, but an animal with a history. As she recorded vaccinations for Starlight 2134, she began to understand the care involved in keeping a herd healthy, but the real impact came in the third week. "Patricia," Mr. Oswald called one morning, "I need you to come with me. We're going to check on a sick calf in pasture 5. They walked under the hot sun, Patricia already sweating in her simple shirt and jeans, no suits here. The calf was lying under a tree, clearly uncomfortable, not getting up as they approached. "Fever," Mr. Oswald said after examining it. "Probably an infection. Needs an antibiotic immediately." He prepared the injection with an efficiency born of decades of practice. The calf, feeling the needle, tried to get up and run. Mr. Oswald held it firmly but gently. "Easy, boy, I know it hurts, but this will help you, I promise." There was a tenderness in his voice, a genuine care. He wasn't just treating an economic asset. He was caring for a living being that felt pain and fear. "Hold him here," Mr. Oswald instructed, "but gently. You don't need force, you need calm. Let him feel we don't want to hurt him." Patricia placed her hands on the calf. It trembled under her touch, and something inside her trembled too. When was the last time she had touched something living, vulnerable, needy? When was the last time she had cared for something other than her own image and position? "There," Mr. Oswald said, finishing the injection. "He'll be better in a day or two, but we'll keep an eye on him." He looked at Patricia. "You'll be responsible for him. Every day you come here, you check on him. If he gets worse, you call me immediately." "Me? But I don't know." "That's why you're learning. I'll teach you what to look for, and you'll do it. Understood?" "Yes, sir." And so a routine began. Every day Patricia walked to pasture 5. She checked on the calf. She watched to see if it was eating, drinking, standing, interacting with others. She jotted observations in a simple notebook. Slowly, the calf got better. On the 5th day, it was standing, eating normally. On the 7th day, it was playing with other calves, and Patricia felt something she hadn't felt in years. True pride. Not pride in status or appearance, but pride in having contributed to something bigger than herself, in having cared, in having mattered. "Good work," Mr. Oswald said when she reported the full recovery. You saved a life. You saved it, Patricia corrected. I just watched. No, he shook his head. You cared. You checked on it every day. You paid attention. That's half the battle. Technical skill I can teach. Caring, that has to come from inside. That night, alone in the small apartment her daughter would visit on the weekend, Patricia looked at her hands. They were dirty. There was dirt under her nails. Her skin, once flawless, was tanned and slightly rough, and she realized these hands had done more good in the last week than in years of efficient management at the hotel. The transformation was just beginning, but for the first time since that horrible day in the lobby of the Gilded Marina, Patricia felt something other than shame. She felt hope. The 5th month at Green Hope Ranch brought a challenge that would test not just Patricia's skills, but her transforming character. Mr. Oswald called everyone for a morning meeting at the ranch house. Besides Patricia and Marina, there were others. John, the ranch's young, newly graduated veterinarian full of modern ideas. Mrs. Rosa, the ranch cook for 30 years. And Beto, the oldest ranch hand who had worked there even before Mr. Oswald. We've got a situation, Mr. Oswald said, his deep voice heavy with concern. The Bonanza Ranch, our neighbor, is in trouble. The owner passed away last month. The widow is trying to keep the operation going, but she doesn't know the business. The cattle are being neglected. Pastures are poorly maintained. I saw 3 animals showing signs of malnutrition yesterday. Why hasn't she called a vet? John asked. Because there's no money. The ranch was in debt before the owner's death. It's even worse now. Marina frowned. So, what can we do? Mrs. Peterson called me yesterday. She said we're going to help. We'll send John over 3 times a week to check on their cattle. No charge. We'll provide basic medicines. No charge. And we'll offer guidance on ranch management. He looked at Patricia. That's where you come in. Patricia blinked. Me? You've worked in management for years. You may not know cattle, but you know numbers, organization, systems. Mrs. Laura, the widow, is drowning in paperwork, debts, and decisions. You're going to go over there twice a week and help her get organized, help her understand what she has, what she owes, and what she can do. But I'm not qualified to— No one asked you to restructure a company, Mr. Oswald interrupted. I asked you to use what you know to help someone in need. Can you do that? Patricia swallowed hard. I can try. Then try. You start tomorrow. The Bonanza Ranch was smaller than Green Hope, more worn, bearing the visible weight of years of mismanagement and recent tragedy. The main house needed painting. Fences had holes. The cattle looked thin, listless. Mrs. Laura was about 50, her hair starting to grey, her eyes red from crying and exhaustion. She opened the door when Patricia arrived, her expression a mix of desperate hope and suspicion. Are you the person Mr. Oswald sent? Yes, I am. My name is Patricia. I don't need charity, Laura said immediately, defensively. I can pay, eventually. I just need time, some temporary help. Patricia recognized that tone. It was wounded pride fighting against desperate need. It was familiar because she herself had sounded exactly like that months ago when Helen offered a second chance. It's not charity, Patricia said gently. It's neighborliness, people helping people, with no expectation of return, no judgment, no strings attached. Laura looked at her for a long moment, then began to cry silently. Come in, please. Laura's office was pure chaos. Unpaid bills stacked in precarious towers, cattle records mixed with vet bills, bank debt notices in urgent red, an old calculator surrounded by scribbled papers with numbers that didn't add up. My goodness, Patricia murmured, looking around. How long has it been like this? My husband was never good with paperwork, Laura admitted, embarrassed. And I grew up in the city. I don't know anything about ranching. I married for love, but he always handled the business. I just took care of the house, the kids. And now he's gone and Her voice broke. Patricia sat down, took a deep breath, and started doing what she knew how to do. Organize, categorize, prioritize. Hours passed. She sorted invoices by urgency. Cattle documents were filed chronologically. Debts were listed with amounts, creditors, and due dates. Slowly the chaos transformed into order. You have a total debt of $280,000, Patricia said eventually, her voice neutral, non-judgmental. Half with the bank, half with suppliers. Your main asset is the cattle. If you sell everything, you might get $350,000 depending on the market. So technically there's positive equity. The problem isn't insolvency. It's cash flow. Laura looked at her, uncomprehending. What does that mean? It means you're not bankrupt. You're just temporarily out of available cash. If you reorganize operations, renegotiate some debts, and keep the cattle healthy until the next sales cycle, you'll survive. I'll survive, Laura repeated, the word sounding like a prayer. Can I really survive? You can, but it will take work, sacrifice, hard decisions. Over the following weeks, Patricia returned twice a week. She taught Laura basic organizational systems, how to track expenses, how to prioritize payments, how to negotiate with creditors. But more importantly, she offered something no system could: compassion, patience, the willingness to explain the same thing 5 times without irritation. And in the process, something extraordinary was happening. Patricia was becoming the person Helen had believed she could be, not the arrogant manager who judged by appearance, but someone who served, someone who cared, someone who used her skills to lift others up, not to lord it over them. One day, Mr. Oswald accompanied her to the Bonanza Ranch. He watched in silence as Patricia worked with Laura, explaining spreadsheets, organizing documents, offering encouragement. When they left, he said, "You've changed." Patricia looked at him surprised. How so? When you got here, you were all pride and self-preservation. Every action was calculated to protect yourself, to promote yourself. Now you're spending your energy helping someone who can never repay you, with no audience to impress, no obvious personal benefit. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because it gets you something. Mrs. Laura reminds me of... Patricia hesitated. She reminds me of myself, lost, scared, needing help, but too proud to ask. If Helen hadn't helped me, I'd be exactly where Laura is, so how can I not help? Mr. Oswald nodded slowly. That's the right answer. And that's why I'm going to say something I didn't think I'd say until the end of the year. Patricia stopped walking, her heart speeding up. What? I'm going to recommend to Mrs. Peterson that you've passed the test. Not just that you've met the minimum requirements, but that you've truly transformed. That the person who arrived here in April is not the person who is here in September. Tears filled Patricia's eyes. Really? Do you really think? I don't think. I know. He placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. You may have started this journey forced out of necessity, out of fear of losing everything, but somewhere along the way, you chose to change for real. And that, girl, that's what matters. Patricia cried right there on the dirt road between 2 ranches, under the September Wyoming sun. But they weren't tears of sadness or shame. They were tears of liberation, of hope, of rebirth. She had been broken in that lobby of the Gilded Marina, but from the brokenness, something better had been built, something stronger, something truer. The transformation was complete, but the story still had one final chapter to be written. Helen arrived in Wyoming on a golden October afternoon, driving her own car, a simple sedan, no ostentatious luxury, down the familiar road to Green Hope Ranch. It had been 6 months since she had sent Patricia here. 6 months since that dramatic day at the hotel. Mr. Oswald greeted her with a strong hug. "Mrs. Peterson, I was expecting you. How is she? Come see for yourself." They found Patricia in the office, working on spreadsheets with Marina, both of them laughing at some private joke. Patricia was different. Her hair, once always in a tight bun, now fell loosely to her shoulders, with a few grey strands showing naturally. She wore no makeup. She had on faded jeans and a simple shirt. Her hands, once immaculate, were now practical, functional, marked by honest work. She looked up and saw Helen. For a second, panic crossed her face. That instinctive fear of judgment, of failure, of losing everything all over again. But then Helen smiled, a genuine, warm, proud smile. "Patricia, may I borrow you for a few minutes?" They walked together through the pastures, the sun beginning its golden descent. Cattle grazed peacefully. Birds sang in scattered trees. There was a peace here, a simplicity that contrasted sharply with the frantic complexity of city life. "Mr. Oswald told me everything," Helen said eventually. "Your work, your progress, your help for Mrs. Laura." "He did." Patricia's voice was hesitant, hopeful. "He did. And more importantly, he told me about your transformation. He said you're not just following rules. You're internalizing lessons, becoming genuinely different." Patricia stopped walking, turning to face Helen. "I wanted to thank you. I know I've said it 1,000 times, but I want to say it again. You could have destroyed me that day. You had every right. Instead, you gave me the most precious thing anyone has ever given me." "What was that?" "A chance to become someone I can respect, someone my daughter can admire. someone who makes a difference because she cares, not because she has power. Tears were streaming freely now. I was lost, Helen, for years, decades. I defined my worth by external things, my title, my clothes, the approval of others. And when you took all that away, you forced me to find worth somewhere else, in who I am, not what I have or how I look. Helen listened in silence, letting Patricia pour out months of reflection. And here, in this simple place, doing humble work, helping people who can never give me anything in return, here I've found peace, purpose, something all my years of chasing status never gave me. So, Helen said gently, the question is, what do you want to do now? Patricia blinked, confused. What do you mean? Your test was for a year, but Mr. Oswald recommended you after 6 months. He said you've already proven a true transformation, so technically you've served your sentence. You can go back to New York, return to the hotel industry if you want. Maybe not as a manager right away, but we can find a suitable position. Patricia stood quiet for a long moment, looking at the pastures, the trees, the sky beginning to paint itself in oranges and purples. Can I ask a question? She said finally. Of course. Do you need someone to manage relations with small ranches, to offer consulting, help with organization, be a bridge between Green Hope and the surrounding rural community? Helen studied her carefully. Are you saying you want to stay? I'm saying I've found my calling. I never thought it would be here doing this, but... Patricia laughed, surprised by her own words. I love it. I love helping Mrs. Laura. I love working with Mr. Oswald. I love the simplicity, the tangible purpose, seeing the direct results of my actions. At the hotel it was all abstract, customer satisfaction, numbers, reports. Here it's real, concrete. It matters. And your daughter? City life? My daughter is thriving here. Better school, cleaner air, less pressure. She told me last month that I'm happier now, that she prefers this mom, the one who comes home dirty but smiling, to the previous mom who came home impeccable but stressed. Helen felt emotion rise in her throat. This was the transformation she had hoped for, but hadn't dared to fully believe was possible. Then, here is my offer, Helen said. I'm creating a new position, Community Relations Coordinator. Your job is to do exactly what you've been doing, help small ranches in the area with organization, basic management, be a bridge between them and the resources Green Hope can offer. A fair salary, not huge but comfortable. Autonomy to structure the program as you see fit. You'll report to Mr. Oswald, but you'll have freedom of action. I accept, Patricia said immediately. No negotiation, no conditions. I accept. They laughed together, the sound carrying years of released tension, of journeys completed, of transformations achieved. But, Helen said, her voice growing more serious, there's something else I need from you. Anything. I want you to go back to the Gilded Marina, once, to do something important. Patricia froze. Go back? But why? Because there are people there who witnessed your fall, but won't see your transformation. There's Jessica, who needs to see that redemption is possible. There are other employees who need to understand that a mistake isn't the end. And there's you, who needs to come full circle. I don't know if I can, Patricia whispered. You can, Helen affirmed, because you're not that woman anymore, and it's important that everyone, especially you, sees that clearly. So it was decided. A month later, in November, Patricia would return to New York, not in humiliation, but in demonstration, not to reclaim what she lost, but to show what she had gained. The journey was about to come full circle. A year after that fateful day, Patricia walked into the lobby of the Gilded Marina Hotel again. But this time everything was different. She didn't arrive in an Uber. She walked from the park, having spent the morning just watching the city, breathing the air, preparing herself mentally. She wasn't wearing an Armani suit. She wore simple dress pants and a cotton blouse. Elegant but accessible, functional but presentable. She didn't carry arrogance or judgment. She carried only a brown envelope and a story of transformation. The lobby was exactly as she remembered. Crystal chandeliers, Italian marble, monumental floral arrangements. But now she saw it with different eyes. She didn't see a temple of exclusivity, but a space that should serve all people with equal dignity. Jessica was behind the reception desk. She looked up and her face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, confusion, recognition, and finally, a genuine smile. Patricia? Hi, Jessica. Patricia's voice was calm, humble. I came to see how you are, and how the hotel is. Jessica came out from behind the counter and, to Patricia's surprise, hugged her. You look different. Good. You look really good. I feel good, Patricia admitted. Better than I have in years. Other employees began to recognize her. Whispers spread. Not malicious whispers, but curious ones. Some remembered that dramatic day. Everyone wanted to know what happened next. Helen emerged from the elevator. She was in New York for another conference and had carefully planned this meeting. "Patricia," she greeted warmly. "Welcome back. Thank you for having me." Helen gestured to the small audience that had formed. Employees, a few curious guests. "Patricia has something to share, something important. So if you could spare a few minutes..." Patricia took a deep breath. This was the moment Helen had insisted on, and she knew why. It wasn't about her. It was about the lesson, about showing everyone that a mistake is not a final destination, that transformation is possible, that second chances matter when they're taken seriously. "A year ago," Patricia began, her voice trembling slightly but firm, "I stood in this exact spot, in this lobby behind that counter, and I made one of the worst mistakes of my life." She told the story. She didn't spare details. She didn't soften her cruelty. She described the bet, the humiliation, the judgment based on appearance. She saw people frowning, shaking their heads, clearly disapproving. "I was wrong," she said simply, profoundly, completely, inexcusably wrong. And when Helen revealed who she really was, not just a wealthy woman but the owner of the hotel I managed, I knew my career was over. My life as I knew it was over. She paused, emotion welling up. But Helen didn't do what I deserved. She didn't destroy me. Instead, she offered me something I never would have given anyone in the same situation, a second chance. A real chance with clear conditions, in a completely different environment, doing humble work that would force me to confront my prejudices and my arrogance. Patricia opened the envelope she was carrying. Inside, photos. She passed them to Jessica, who looked at them and then passed them to others. Photos of Patricia on the ranch, working in simple offices, checking on cattle, helping Mrs. Laura with paperwork. Dirty, sweating, genuinely smiling while doing work the former Patricia would have considered beneath her. "I spent 6 months at the Green Hope Ranch," she continued, "and there I learned things that no MBA or hotel management course ever taught me. I learned about true humility, about how a person's worth has nothing to do with their appearance or their bank account, about how true service means lifting others up, not lording it over them." She looked around, making eye contact with employees she had likely mistreated or ignored during her years as manager. "I apologize," she said, tears now streaming freely, "to all of you who worked under my management and were judged, belittled, or treated as less important. I was wrong, and I am deeply sorry." Silence. Then, slowly, someone started to clap, then another, and another. Soon the entire lobby was applauding, not celebrating the old Patricia, but honoring the courage it takes to admit a profound mistake and demonstrate genuine change. Jessica hugged her again, crying too. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Helen approached, placing a hand on Patricia's shoulder. "There's one last thing," she said to the audience. "A lesson everyone needs to understand, especially in service industries like hospitality." She gestured to Patricia. "This woman made a grave mistake, but when given the opportunity to change, she chose to do the hard work of real transformation, and now she is using her experience, both her mistakes and her growth, to help others. That is what we expect from everyone in any organization I manage." Helen turned to the hotel staff. "Every person who walks through those doors, whether in Louboutins or flat sandals in Armani or simple cotton, deserves the exact same respect, the same standard of service, the same acknowledgement of their human dignity, not because they can pay more, not because they look important, but because they are a human being, and that is enough." More applause, stronger now. "Jessica has done an exceptional job as interim manager," Helen continued. "So I am officially promoting her to general manager of the Gilded Marina, and we are implementing new training programs focused not just on technical skills, but on the core values of respect and dignity." The final celebration took place that evening, a dinner in the panoramic restaurant. Not just Helen and Patricia, but Jessica, Mr. Oswald, who flew in specially from Wyoming, Frank and Marcy, Richard, and others who had been part of the story. "A toast," said Frank, raising his glass, "to second chances, to true transformation, and to extraordinary women who prove that character matters more than anything else." "To second chances," everyone echoed. As they dined, laughed, and shared stories, Helen watched everyone around the table, Patricia now genuinely happy and at peace with herself, Jessica growing into leadership with grace and humility, Mr. Oswald, the quiet teacher whose wisdom had shaped a transformation. And she realized this was true success. Not the millions in the bank, not the hotels and ranches she owned, but the lives she had touched, the transformations she had facilitated, the good she had multiplied through mercy combined with justice. "What are you thinking about?" Mr. Oswald asked, noticing her distant expression. "I'm thinking," Helen replied, "that Mr. Johnson would be proud, not of my material achievements, but of what I did with the power they gave me. He taught me that success isn't what you accumulate, but what you do for others when you have the resources to make a difference." "He would be very proud," Mr. Oswald agreed. "As am I." The evening ended with hugs, promises to keep in touch, and plans for future visits. Patricia would return to Wyoming tomorrow to continue her work with small ranchers. Jessica would continue transforming the culture of the Gilded Marina. Helen would return to her life of conferences, auctions, and managing her various operations. But they all carried something new, the confirmation that people can change, that second chances matter, and that the greatest power is not to crush others, but to lift them up. As Helen stood alone in the empty lobby late that night, looking at the marble floor where it had all begun a year ago, she smiled. One story had ended, but countless others had begun. Because everyone who witnessed that day, both the humiliation and the redemption, would carry the lessons into their own lives, their own decisions, their own choices about how to treat others. And maybe, just maybe, the world would become a little better. One second chance at a time, one transformation at a time, one act of mercy at a time. Helen turned off the lobby lights and went up to her suite, carrying a deep satisfaction that no material success had ever given her. The journey had begun with humiliation, but it ended with something far more powerful. It ended with hope, and hope she knew was the most precious wealth of all.